11 doctors stood helpless as a billionaire's heart rate dropped. 90. 70. 50. Machine screamed. Nurses panicked. Then a head nurse shouted, "Trash like you doesn't belong on this floor." She ripped a notebook from a 13-year-old black boy's hands and threw him out of the VIP wing. What they didn't know: that boy was the only person in the entire hospital who knew exactly what was killing the billionaire. Because 3 years earlier, he had watched his own mother die the exact same way. In this very hospital, after doctors said it was all in her head. Asterisk. Trash like you doesn't belong on the 12th floor. The head nurse's voice cut through the pristine hallway like a blade, sharp and loud enough to turn heads. She stood tall, perfectly pressed uniform, expensive shoes clicking against marble floors that had never known real dirt. In front of her stood 13-year-old Benjamin Turner, thin, silent, clutching a worn spiral notebook to his chest like armor that was already cracking. She jabbed a finger toward the glass wall of the VIP suite behind her. "That man in there is worth $5.3 billion, she snapped. "Charles Whitfield is the most important patient this hospital has ever had. And you," her eyes dragged over Benjamin's hoodie, his shaking hands, his refusal to make eye contact, "you have no right to stand here staring at him like some kind of exhibit." Benjamin opened his mouth, struggling to shape words that never came easily. His fingers tightened around the notebook. The words were in there. The answers were in there. He just needed 1 minute. He didn't get it. With a sharp motion, the nurse ripped the notebook from his hands and hurled it down the hallway. It slammed into the wall and burst open, pages scattering across the spotless floor, handwritten notes, diagrams, months of desperate study fluttering like wounded birds. Gasps rippled through nearby staff. No one stopped her. Behind the glass, inside the VIP suite, Charles Whitfield's body convulsed violently on the hospital bed. His skin had turned an unnatural gray. His lips were darkening, blue bleeding into purple. The heart monitor shrieked in erratic, panic bursts that echoed down the corridor. Inside the room, 11 doctors crowded around him, some of the best money could buy. Their voices overlapped in frantic confusion. Heart rates unstable. CT was clean. Toxicology came back negative. This makes no sense. Careers were on the line. Donations. Reputation. Power. And standing just outside the glass, ignored and humiliated, was the only person in the building who knew exactly what was happening. Because Benjamin Turner wasn't staring out of curiosity. He was watching a man die the same way his mother had. And no one was listening. 3 hours earlier, the 12th floor had looked nothing like a place where someone might die. It had been transformed into a palace of excess for Sterling Heights Medical Institute's annual Christmas Eve gala. Crystal chandeliers spilled warm light over nearly 200 guests dressed in tailored suits and gowns worth more than most people's cars. Tickets cost $60,000 each, and not a single one had gone unsold. Champagne flowed freely, bottles that cost more than a month's rent popping open with careless ease. Laughter echoed off marble columns. Donors congratulated one another on their generosity, glasses raised high beneath banners celebrating compassion, innovation, and saving lives. At the center of it all stood Charles Whitfield. The billionaire CEO wore a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit, a Patek Philippe watch glinting at his wrist, its price enough to change a family's life forever. He smiled easily, the smile of a man who had mastered the art of looking benevolent. He raised his glass. Novartis Biosystems is proud to announce a $12 million commitment to pediatric cancer research, he said, pausing just long enough for the applause to crest. Because we believe every child deserves a fighting chance. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Headlines were already being written. 12 floors below, in a basement that smelled of mold and burnt coffee, Benjamin Turner sat alone on a metal chair beside a row of humming pipes. The gala music above was nothing more than a distant vibration through concrete. His father, Gerald Turner, watched security monitors from a battered desk, his uniform faded from too many overnight shifts. What Whitfield spent on a single glass of whiskey was more than Gerald earned in a week. Benjamin didn't notice the noise, the distance, or the imbalance. He was reading. A thick medical textbook rested in his lap, its pages filled with highlighted passages and cramped handwritten notes in the margins. He turned pages with careful precision, completely absorbed, learning about diseases most doctors would never see, and therefore never remember. Above him, a billionaire celebrated saving children. Below him, a child studied how people were quietly left to die. And no one on the 12th floor noticed the invisible thread already tightening around Charles Whitfield's life. At 10:40 p.m., Charles Whitfield felt something go wrong. It started as a faint flutter deep in his stomach, subtle enough that he almost ignored it. He took another sip of champagne, but the taste was off, sharp and unpleasant, like metal on his tongue. He frowned slightly, then smoothed his expression before anyone could notice. Too much rich food, he joked to his assistant, waving it away with practiced confidence. Comes with hosting. But the discomfort didn't fade. As the gala continued, the flutter became nausea, a slow, creeping sensation that climbed his throat. His abdomen tightened in sharp, unfamiliar waves, pain flickering and retreating before he could fully register it. Whitfield loosened his tie, breathing carefully, unwilling to disrupt the image he had spent a lifetime building. 12 floors below, Benjamin suddenly closed his book. The motion was abrupt enough that Gerald looked up from the monitors. "Everything okay, Ben?" Benjamin didn't answer right away. His head tilted slightly, eyes unfocused, listening, not to sound, but to something else entirely. "There's a smell," he said quietly. Gerald frowned. "A smell?" "Yes." Benjamin's fingers began tapping against his knee in a slow, rhythmic pattern. "It's coming through the ventilation system. From the elevator shaft." "You can't smell something from 12 floors up," Gerald said gently. "I can," Benjamin replied, his voice tight with certainty. "It's chemical. Sweet, but wrong. Like fruit rotting from the inside." He flipped his notebook open to a page he had memorized. "Metabolic acidosis," he whispered. "It has a very specific odor. Most people can't detect it." Gerald hesitated. Over the years, he had learned not to dismiss his son's instincts. Benjamin struggled with things other children found easy: eye contact, conversation, noise, but he noticed patterns others missed entirely. "Someone upstairs is very sick," Benjamin said. "Seriously sick." Back on the 12th floor, Whitfield's pain sharpened without warning. He doubled over briefly, sweat breaking across his forehead. His assistant's smile faded. "Sir, I think we should get you checked." Whitfield nodded, the room spinning just slightly as the decision was made for him. The invisible thread tightened. And the clock began to run. The smell brought everything back. Benjamin's fingers froze against the page as memory crashed into him with brutal clarity. He had smelled this before. Not once, but again and again, years earlier, in this same hospital. 3 years ago. September 22nd. His mother, Sarah Turner, lay curled on an ER bed on the 8th floor, her body trembling as pain tore through her abdomen in violent waves. She had come to the emergency room 4 times in 2 weeks, each visit worse than the last. "Please," she had whispered, clutching the thin hospital blanket. "Something is wrong." The doctors barely looked up from her chart. Gastritis. Irritable bowel syndrome. Stress. One physician sighed loudly, irritation clear on his face. Another avoided eye contact altogether. On the 4th visit, a note appeared in her file that would seal her fate. Drug-seeking behavior. Benjamin had been 10 years old, standing in the corner of the room, hands pressed to his ears as the fluorescent lights buzzed and burned into his skull. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone, the way they spoke to her, like she was exaggerating, like she was inconvenient. They sent her home. 18 hours later, Sarah Turner collapsed on the bathroom floor of their small apartment, screaming in agony as her body convulsed. Paramedics arrived too late. Doctors insisted it was anxiety. Psychosomatic. A panic episode. Benjamin held her hand as it grew cold. I love you most, baby, she whispered, barely audible. More than anything. Then she seized. Weeks later, the autopsy results arrived. Acute intermittent porphyria. A rare genetic disorder. 1 in 100,000. Treatable, if recognized. A $50 test could have saved her life. Benjamin hadn't cried at the funeral. Instead, he started reading. Medical journals pulled from trash bins. Discarded textbooks. Case studies no one bothered to keep. While other children slept, he memorized symptoms, patterns, failures. If I had known then, he told himself night after night, I could have saved her. Now, 3 years later, standing in a basement that smelled exactly the same, Benjamin felt the pattern repeat itself. Someone upstairs was dying. And this time, he wasn't going to let it happen again. By 11:40 p.m., the billionaire was no longer pretending. Charles Whitfield lay strapped to a gurney as it tore through the hospital corridors, his body writhing in pain that no medication could touch. Alarms chirped, then screamed. Nurses exchanged looks they tried to hide. This was no longer a gala inconvenience. This was a crisis. In the basement, Benjamin's eyes snapped to security monitor 12. Doctors flooded into a single room on the 12th floor with frantic urgency. White coats. Rushed movements. Controlled chaos, the unmistakable visual signature of someone important dying. That's him, Benjamin whispered. Gerald turned sharply. Who? The person I've been smelling, Benjamin said, already standing. He's showing the same progression. The exact same pattern. Gerald felt his stomach drop. Ben, what pattern? Benjamin swallowed hard. Mom's. The word hit like a punch. He's dying the same way she did, Benjamin continued. They don't know what's killing him. But I do. Gerald didn't hesitate. Okay, he said, grabbing his jacket. Let's go. They ran for the elevator. Gerald swiped his badge, technically unauthorized for the 12th floor, but the light turned green. The doors slid shut, trapping them inside a box that felt far too small. The elevator climbed painfully slowly. Benjamin's breathing quickened. The lights were too bright. The enclosed space pressed in on him, overwhelming his senses. He rocked slightly, fingers tapping against his leg to keep himself grounded. 7, 8, 9. Each number was a reminder of where his mother had died. 10, 11. Ben, stay with me, Gerald said softly. I know what's wrong, Benjamin replied. They're making it worse. Every minute they wait. 12. The doors opened. A man stepped directly into their path. Gray hair. Expensive glasses. Authority carved into every line of his face. Dr. Richard Hayes. He glanced at Gerald's uniform and frowned. You work security, don't you? What exactly are you doing on the VIP floor? Benjamin tightened his grip on his father's hand. They won't believe me, he whispered. But I have proof. Hayes's eyes flicked briefly to Benjamin, then away. Mr. Turner, he said coldly, I have 30 years of medical experience. Are you seriously suggesting your 13-year-old son knows something my team doesn't? Behind him, through the glass, the billionaire convulsed violently. And time was running out. I'm not suggesting, Gerald said, his voice shaking but steady. I'm telling you, my son knows what's wrong. Dr. Hayes didn't respond. He didn't need to. He turned slightly, blocking the doorway with his body, his badge catching the harsh hallway light like a warning. Get them out of here, he said to a nurse without even looking back. 2 security guards stepped forward. Benjamin flinched. Inside the VIP suite, the heart monitor flatlined for half a second, just long enough for everyone to freeze, before jerking back into a chaotic rhythm. A nurse shouted numbers. Someone cursed under their breath. Benjamin tore free of his father's hand. "Stop," he yelled. The word echoed down the corridor, raw and sharp. Every head turned. Benjamin's hands shook as he spoke, words spilling faster now, urgency burning through his fear. "He's not having a heart attack. You're treating the wrong organ. The morphine, the barbiturates, you're accelerating it." Dr. Hayes laughed once, short and incredulous. "Security, now." Benjamin didn't stop. "He has acute intermittent porphyria," he said, voice cracking but clear. "It causes severe abdominal pain, seizures, cardiac instability, and confusion. Stress and certain drugs trigger attacks. Every medication you've given him makes it worse." The room went silent. A junior doctor frowned. That's extremely rare." Benjamin nodded. "So is dying like this?" Hayes scoffed. "This is absurd. We ran toxicology. It wouldn't show," Benjamin shot back instantly. "You need a porphobilinogen urine test. It costs $50. You haven't ordered it." A nurse glanced at the chart. "It's not there," she whispered. Whitfield convulsed again, harder this time. His oxygen saturation plummeted. "Run the test," Benjamin begged. "Please. You can still save him." For the first time, doubt crept into Hayes's eyes. 30 seconds passed. Another seizure hit. "Do it," Hayes snapped suddenly. "Run the test." The nurse sprinted out. Those 30 seconds felt like an hour. When she returned, her face had gone pale. "Positive," she said quietly. "Strongly positive." The room erupted into motion. "Stop all contraindicated meds. Prepare Heman, now. Stabilize electrolytes." Whitfield's breathing slowed. His heart rhythm steadied. Color crept back into his face like life returning inch by inch. Benjamin sagged against the wall, exhausted, tears blurring his vision. The monitors stopped screaming. They hummed. For the first time that night, the billionaire wasn't dying. Dr. Hayes turned slowly toward the boy he had tried to throw out. "How did you know?" he asked. Benjamin wiped his eyes. "Because you let my mom die," he said quietly. And the words landed harder than any accusation ever could. The room stayed quiet long after the crisis passed. Machines continued their soft, steady hum, but no one spoke. 11 doctors stood frozen, staring at the monitors like they had personally offended death and been spared anyway. Charles Whitfield lay unconscious now, stabilized, a billionaire reduced to a fragile human body wrapped in wires and tubes. For the first time that night, he looked small. Dr. Hayes cleared his throat. His confidence was gone. In its place sat something far heavier. Get everyone out except essential staff," he said. As nurses and residents filtered out, Hayes turned back to Benjamin and Gerald. "You saved his life," he said quietly. Benjamin didn't answer. Because in his mind, he wasn't in the room anymore. He was back in a small apartment bathroom, kneeling on cold tile, begging doctors who never came. Gerald placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Ben?" Benjamin looked up, eyes red but steady. "You didn't listen to her," he said, voice flat. "You labeled her. You sent her home. And then you forgot her name." Hayes swallowed. "What was her name?" "Sarah Turner." The doctor closed his eyes. "I remember the case," he admitted. "Middle-aged black woman. Severe abdominal pain. Anxiety diagnosis." His voice dropped. "I signed off on it." The words hung in the air like a confession. "You were wrong," Benjamin said. Not angry. Just factual. "And you didn't check." Hayes nodded slowly. "You're right." For a man who had spent decades protecting his reputation, the admission cost him more than he would ever say. Outside the room, word spread fast. The billionaire lived. The doctors were baffled. And a security guard's son had done what 11 specialists couldn't. An hour later, Charles Whitfield woke up. The first thing he saw was Benjamin. He frowned weakly. Who are you?" Benjamin hesitated. Gerald gave a small nod. "I'm the reason you're alive," Benjamin said. Whitfield blinked, then laughed hoarsely. "That's quite a thing to say." "You were dying of acute intermittent porphyria," Benjamin continued calmly. "Your doctors missed it." "I didn't." Whitfield stared at him longer this time. "And how," he asked slowly, "does a kid know that?" Benjamin's voice didn't waver. "Because my mother died from it. In this hospital." The room went very still. Whitfield looked away, shame flickering across his face. "I donate millions to this place." "I know," Benjamin said. "I saw the banners." Whitfield exhaled deeply. "What do you want?" Benjamin thought of notebooks pulled from trash bins. Of nights studying while others slept. Of a mother who should have lived. "I want you to make sure this never happens again," he said. "Not to anyone. Especially not to people who don't look important." Whitfield nodded. Slowly. "Seriously. You have my word." And for the first time, Benjamin believed someone powerful enough to keep it. The hours after the crisis felt surreal. The emergency faded, but the weight of what had happened hung over the VIP suite like a storm cloud. Doctors whispered among themselves, some in shame, some in awe, all aware that a 13-year-old boy had done what decades of medical training had failed to achieve. Charles Whitfield, once untouchable and untouchably arrogant, sat in a chair by the window, still pale but conscious, staring at the city lights. He could feel the fragility of life in a way he never had before. The gala, the donations, the self-congratulatory speeches, they all seemed meaningless now. Benjamin remained quietly in the corner, hoodie still drawn tight, notebook clutched in his hand. Gerald hovered nearby, protective but careful not to interfere. For once, their world had collided with the one above, and it had changed everything. Whitfield's voice was quiet, tentative. "Tell me exactly what you want. I need to understand." Benjamin stepped forward, finally letting a fraction of his intensity show. "Access. Every research project your company has terminated, every abandoned drug development, every rare disease you decided wasn't profitable. I want to study them. Learn the patterns. Make sure no one else dies invisible and forgotten." Whitfield hesitated, the weight of years of corporate decision-making pressing down. Then he nodded slowly. "You'll have it. Everything. And," Benjamin continued, "create a scholarship program. For students who learn differently but see patterns others don't. I want them to have a chance, the way I didn't get a chance in school." A pause. Whitfield's jaw tightened. "Done. And the research?" Benjamin asked. "Make it public. Transparent. No more secrets. No more burying science for profit." Whitfield exhaled, the first real humility in his body. "It will be public. Everything. Immediately." Dr. Brooks, who had stayed quietly observing, finally spoke. "We should formalize this. Benjamin Turner should lead a rare disease consult service here. He saved a life tonight. He knows more about patterns and rare conditions than any of us." Hayes looked at her skeptically. "He's 13. Brooks' eyes hardened. "And he just diagnosed a billionaire who almost died. Are we really going to debate his age?" Silence. Hayes knew she was right. Benjamin looked at Whitfield. "I'll do it, but only if I can change the way this hospital, and maybe the world, approaches rare diseases. No shortcuts. No ignoring people because they don't have money or visibility." Whitfield extended his hand. "You have my word." For the first time that night, Benjamin felt a small, cautious hope. A hope that Sarah Turner's death, his mother, hadn't been meaningless. That her life, and her death, could finally make a difference. Gerald placed a steady hand on Benjamin's shoulder. "She'd be proud, Ben. You're making her count." Benjamin nodded, clenching his notebook. I will. And with that, the hospital, its elite halls, its billionaire patients, and its forgotten basements, shifted forever. One boy's determination had cracked open a system built on hierarchy, greed, and neglect, proving that insight, courage, and a relentless drive to see what others refused to see could change lives. Benjamin Turner had saved a billionaire. And in doing so, he had begun saving thousands more. Weeks after that night, Sterling Heights Medical Institute had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The third-floor research wing, once a graveyard of discarded projects, had been transformed into the Rare Disease Consult Center. Floors that once smelled of mold and forgotten papers now hummed with computers, monitors, and medical staff collaborating in ways that prioritized insight over bureaucracy. Benjamin Turner, now 16, sat at a desk buried under journals, case files, and 3 large monitors streaming real-time data from the national database he had helped design. His hoodie was worn and comfortable, as always, his hands fidgeting with a pen as he cross-referenced case studies with patient records. Gerald, now his constant supporter and mentor, had grown more patient in understanding his son's unique needs. Bright lights, loud noises, and social interaction still overwhelmed him at times, but his purpose gave him strength. Dr. Emily Brooks entered, followed by a resident with a clipboard. Benjamin, we have a challenging case. A 28-year-old woman, 6 months of progressive muscle weakness, worse after exertion. CK levels are normal, EMG inconclusive. Benjamin barely looked up, fingers flying across the keyboard as he accessed the database. Exercise intolerance with normal CK levels, intermittent double vision, drooping eyelids worse in the evening, all improve with rest. This is myasthenia gravis, atypical presentation. Order acetylcholine receptor antibody test. If negative, test for MuSK antibodies. Chest CT for thymoma. About 10% of cases present this way. The resident blinked, overwhelmed. How do you know all of this so fast? Benjamin shrugged, uncomfortable with attention. I read extensively. I remember patterns. That's all. Brooks smiled, pride in her eyes. In just 6 months, Benjamin has successfully diagnosed 43 rare disease cases that would have otherwise been misdiagnosed. He's saving more lives than most physicians in their careers. The database had grown from 216 documented rare disease cases to over 4,000 cases worldwide, crowdsourced and fully public. Benjamin's vision was taking shape, a system where every misdiagnosis, every rare case, every overlooked patient could be tracked, analyzed, and prevented from being forgotten. He returned to his work, creating training modules for medical students, interactive case studies, video lectures, and animated flowcharts. Lessons he painstakingly taught himself were now being packaged for a generation of doctors who would never ignore patients like Sarah Turner. Gerald texted, "So proud of you, son. Pizza tonight." Benjamin smiled faintly, a quiet warmth blooming inside him. The world still overwhelmed him sometimes, but now, he had a weapon, knowledge, insight, and a purpose that could save lives. For the first time, he felt the weight of his mother's death transform into something constructive. Not revenge, not anger, but action. And through that action, thousands of invisible patients would finally be seen, remembered, and valued. 3 years later, the Sarah Turner Rare Disease Fund had successfully funded 49 different research projects worldwide. The Benjamin Turner Medical Scholarship had graduated 89 students, all neurodivergent minds trained to detect patterns others missed, just like Benjamin had. The National Rare Disease Database had grown into a comprehensive global resource, aiding physicians and patients across 6 continents, saving thousands of lives that would otherwise have been lost to misdiagnosis or neglect. Benjamin, now 19, had become a symbol of what unconventional talent could achieve. He still wore hoodies to formal events, still avoided direct eye contact, still needed quiet spaces after overwhelming situations, but he had authority, respect, and purpose. The medical community, once dismissive, now sought his insight on rare disease cases, relying on his pattern recognition skills that had proven more precise than decades of conventional training. At Sterling Heights, the research wing buzzed with collaboration. Students and doctors worked side by side with Benjamin, sharing insights, testing hypotheses, and following his vision of inclusive, life-saving medicine. Rare disease patients who had once been invisible now had voices, their cases documented, analyzed, and prioritized. Whitfield, now humbled and transformed, personally oversaw the fund, scholarship, and database, ensuring that profit never again dictated who lived or died. He had learned firsthand the human cost of decisions made solely for financial gain. Benjamin often reflected on his journey, from the basement of Sterling Heights, overlooked and underestimated, to a leader who shaped the future of rare disease medicine. Every life saved, every student empowered, every patient given a chance mattered to him. He thought of his mother, Sarah Turner, whose death had ignited this mission. Her memory lived not in sorrow, but in action, through every patient who survived because someone like Benjamin refused to let them be forgotten. On a quiet evening in his office, Benjamin glanced at the monitors streaming live patient data from around the world. Each case was a story, a life saved, a family spared the grief his own had endured. And in that moment, he understood that his purpose was larger than himself, larger than Sterling Heights, larger even than the medical breakthroughs he had sparked. He was 19, a self-taught genius, an autistic teen who saw the unseen, saved the unseeable, and changed the course of modern medicine forever. And for every rare disease patient who had ever been told they didn't matter, he had a simple, unwavering message. You are seen. You are valued. You are not forgotten. The story ends on that note of triumph, hope, and transformative change, turning tragedy into a legacy that would save countless lives for generations to come.